Did you know that more than half of millennials and Gen Zers believe they need to win the lottery to afford a home today? If that doesn't perfectly summarize the state of the housing market for young people, I don't know what does.
The housing market is flashing red.
Sometimes I'll just walk around my neighborhood and look at all of the houses around me and be like, how the fuck did all of these people figure this out?
Americans must bring in a household income of over $100,000 annually to afford a typical median-priced home in the U.S., and this figure has increased by 50% since 2020.
Because for decades, owning a home was really the foundation of the American dream. But today, for so many, that dream feels further away than ever before. And there are many reasons for this. Wages haven't kept up, higher interest rates and real estate prices have locked people into their existing homes while simultaneously gatekeeping millions of potential homebuyers. Rent is expensive, which burdens many and further prevents them from saving for a house. But also, starter homes barely exist, and when they do, they're going for luxury prices today. When you delay owning a home, you delay starting a family, you delay building wealth, but you also delay life. And this is concerning governments across the globe, including right here in the US. So in this video, we're going to break down exactly what happened to the starter home, why it matters way more than people might realize, and what it means for the next generation of Americans who can't afford to grow up.
I don't really have a great answer for your question because I really don't give a fuck.
For decades, the starter home was exactly what it sounded like. An attainable first step into adulthood. Modest, affordable, and just enough to start building a life. But somewhere along the way, that foundation started to crumble. And today, the starter home has essentially become a phenomenon. In the early 1980s, about 40% of new single-family homes in the US were under 1,400 square feet. Homes built with first-time buyers in mind. But today, that number sits at just 8.7%. Developers aren't building smaller homes anymore because people don't suddenly want them, but because they don't make as much money. If a builder can put up 5 luxury homes instead of 10 modest ones on the same land, well, that decision's already made. Local zoning laws also make it worse by restricting dense, affordable developments, and many of the places with unaffordable housing have a not-in-my-backyard type of mentality, which makes zoning reform even more difficult to overcome. But even if the supply was there, prices are a whole different story. Housing prices have increased 2 times faster than income since 1985, and 2.1 times faster than income since 2000. If home prices had grown at the same rate as income since 2000, the median US home would cost nearly $294,000, about 32% less than today's price. And this is why young people feel like they need to win the lottery to have a chance at home ownership. With the median price of a new home in the US being nearly $450,000, more than 3/4 of American households can't afford it. So currently, the housing market looks more like an exclusion zone for young people. And obviously, it's hitting first-time buyers the hardest. Between mid-2023 and mid-2024, only 24% of home purchases were made by first-time buyers. This was a historic low. But for most Americans, their home isn't just where they live, it's also their wealth. The typical middle-class household holds the majority of their net worth in their home equity. But housing is a negative-sum starting line. If you don't already own, you're not at 0, you're at -1. Renting means paying someone else's mortgage, plus profit, and without equity to trade up from, buying your first home becomes even harder with these insane prices. It's essentially like running a 1-mile race, but all of the other contestants get a 10-minute head start. But even for those who somehow manage to find a home within reach, the financial hurdles are staggering. The down payment alone is often a non-starter. On a $400,000 home, even a modest 10% down is $40K. Most young people simply don't have that type of money. In fact, a growing number of first-time homebuyers now rely on help from family just to scrape together the upfront costs. And that's a privilege not everyone has access to. But let's say they even manage to clear that hurdle. The long-term math doesn't get any friendlier. Because on a 30-year fixed mortgage at current interest rates, many buyers will end up paying as much or more in interest as they do in principal over the lifetime of the loan. That means a $400,000 home could cost well over $700,000 by the time it's fully paid off. Now, previous generations saw mortgage rates spike at times, yes, but they were buying homes at far lower prices. The debt load today is heavier, and more enduring. Which brings us to the monthly cost. Rising interest rates have pushed mortgage payments to record highs. Combine that with increased property taxes, home insurance, and you guessed it, HOA fees. The true cost of home ownership balloons fast. Now, homeowners associations were once a niche concept, but have become increasingly more common in the US, especially in newer developments. In 1970, fewer than 1% of US homes were part of an HOA. Today, that number's at over 25% and rising. What makes matters even worse here is that in many cities, the few affordable homes or condos left are often tied to HOAs, which can tack on several $100s in monthly fees. According to the US Census Bureau, the average HOA fee in the US was $243 a month in 2023. Now that's 42% higher than the average HOA fee was in 2019. And sure, some HOAs do add value to the home. Lawn care, shared amenities, and even security in some cases. But let's be real. For a lot of them, their rise is just another way for developers to keep making money after the home is sold. Another monthly payment, another layer of oversight, and another reminder that ownership is becoming increasingly more obsolete. Now, for buyers who stretch to afford these kinds of mortgages, those recurring costs can tip the scales from tight budget to financial distress. Mortgage delinquencies are already rising, especially first-time buyers using FHA loans. Data from early 2024 showed delinquencies on FHA loans were 2.5 percentage points higher than pre-COVID levels. And these loans are designed to help people get into homes, but lowering the down payment is only one part of the equation here. Owning a home used to mark the beginning of adulthood, financially, emotionally, and even socially. It was the first big decision that shaped all of the others. But when that decision is out of reach, the rest begins to unravel. More young adults are living with their parents well into their 30s. Many who want to get married or start families are putting those plans on hold, not because they've all of a sudden changed their values, but because they're stuck in a holding pattern. And housing is a big part of that. Rents are high, savings are low, and student debt hangs over everything. The cost of living for anything has increased substantially over the last 5 years. So for a lot of people, just staying afloat is a full-time job. And building towards a spot where financially they can buy a home feels impossible. According to Pew Research, over 1/3 of adults under 50 who don't have children cite financial concerns as the main reason. And when you look at the numbers, it makes sense. It costs over $300,000 to raise a child today. That's before college, before inflation, or before any emergencies. Meanwhile, the median age for first-time homebuyers has climbed to nearly 38 years old, the oldest it's ever been. That used to be the age you were moving out of your starter home. Now it's the age people are finally getting in if they're lucky. But I don't think of this as just a personal finance issue. I think of it as a slow-moving societal shift with real long-term consequences. For years, we've treated home ownership as a private milestone. But when an entire generation gets boxed out of that milestone, the ripple effects don't stay private. Birth rates are falling across the board, fewer families are forming, and the financial insecurity that drives those decisions is compounding. A smaller next generation means fewer workers, fewer consumers, and fewer taxpayers to support things like schools, healthcare, and Social Security. That's just basic math. But meanwhile, the gap between those who can buy and those who can't is only getting wider. I mentioned, as of 2024, first-time homebuyers have hit an all-time low, just 24% of all home purchases. But here's the thing, cash buyers, well, they reached 33%, nearing an all-time high. That tells you who this market is built for. Not young families trying to put down roots, but investors and wealthy buyers looking for more assets.
We built fewer homes in the 2010s than in any decade going back to the 1960s. And at the same time, millennials are the biggest generation and they're entering into home buying age. And we didn't build any housing for them in the last decade because we are still so traumatized by the last housing crisis. We didn't put any investment into housing.
And the result isn't just a reshaped version of the housing market. It's more inequality too. More homes are being bought not to be lived in, but to be flipped, rented, or held as financial instruments. The idea of a home as a place to build a life is being replaced by the idea of a home as a portfolio line item. But here's the part no one in power seems to want to say out loud. This can't keep going. If first-time buyers are priced out of a 2-bed, 1-bath condo in San Diego County for $750 grand, who's gonna buy that when it hits $1 million? And how long until it is worth $1 million? See, the market will eventually run out of people who can afford to play. And when that happens, the whole thing begins to implode. It's a system that rewards the haves and has shut out the have-nots. Now, there are solutions to this, though. Zoning reform could unlock more affordable housing in cities where space isn't the issue. Governments could offer real down payment assistance programs for first-time buyers, not just Band-Aid tax credits. We could also incentivize building more starter homes again instead of just luxury condos. But let's be honest, none of that is happening right now. Instead, our government just hit countries with tariffs, which will certainly increase the cost of housing. And in the meantime, more and more young people will be shut out of the market, not because they're irresponsible, but because this system was never built for them to begin with. And when entire generations are locked out of owning assets like housing, they're falling further behind in a race that never gave them a fair start. But I'll be honest with you, the lack of affordable housing is just a symptom of a much greater problem. And that problem is the growing inequality of wealth in the United States. So if you want to understand just how deep that problem goes, well, I covered it in this video here. Go ahead and check it out next. Thanks for watching.